let's open this up now to questions and answers. We get into things like you want to hear about Jack Ruby or Oliver Stone in his movie. Yes, sir.
Yes. Yeah. You said much earlier that although you have plenty of ego as a lawyer,
right,
that you have absolutely no ego as a writer.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a great writer at all. Probably over 50% of the group out here can write better than I can.
Isn't that latter part a terribly egoistic statement?
Isn't it egoistic to think that I might be a better writer than 50% of the group here? Wait a while. Is that what you're saying?
No, I said
okay.
that the statement that you have no ego as a writer
means that
all.
I do have an ego.
No, isn't that an egoistic statement? The statement. I'm not saying what it proves.
What I'm saying is that I don't think I'm a great writer. And my wife says, don't say that on radio and TV. People like to read your writing. I said, I'm pretty good at sarcasm, but they said, don't say that. And I say, well, I'm being truthful. I don't think I'm a great writer at all. No, why is that
earlier you
egotistical?
You said that it was a natural thing that...
I may have said something to contradict that. I'm getting up, and don't get old. It's not good to get old.
That the
because
Kennedy
you know
assassination was endless. And yet you said you have 10,000 citations in your book, but really only one conviction, that Oswald and Oswald alone committed the murder.
Right.
And yet you say that you said that it transcends common sense, that you could dig and dig and dig and never get to the end of it. How can you have that conviction?
How can I have the conviction if it's endless? Wait, that's not a bad question, by the way. But there's an answer to it. You know what the answer is? Once you prove something conclusively, okay, then there can be all types of other things out here that you don't know the answer to. But you know there's an answer, and it's not going to change your conclusion. Why? Because you've already proved it, okay? Now, if you haven't proved it, okay, let's say you've only proved it beyond a reasonable doubt. There's some slight doubt. Then you've got to worry about these things out there. But once you prove, for instance, that the earth is round, okay, and you prove it, and you know it, 100%, then you can dismiss whatever someone writes, any treatise they write on the earth being flat. Why? Because you know the earth is round. Now, if you didn't know the earth was round, then you'd have to deal with these other things. So when I say it's endless, all this other stuff is just drivel. It's nonsense, okay? But even though it's nonsense, if you're trying to write a book for the ages, which was my intent, you have to deal with this nonsense. I can't just write a 2-page book and say, this is all silly, there's nothing to say, it's 2 pages. No, I got to address myself to all this silliness.
Right, and you say you dealt with it conclusively.
Okay, I'm sorry. You may have a point. You may have a point. I can't follow you. Okay, yeah, ma'am?
You have talked about 3 bullets. Where were they actually found?
Okay.
The 3 bullets, where were they?
The question is, there were 3 bullets. Where were they actually found? The first bullet missed the presidential limousine completely. I could get into detail as to why that shot probably missed. I'll just tell you one possible reason. Is there was an oak tree there from the window looking at the presidential limousine. There was an oak tree at 166. This is Zapruder film, so it was a rush shot. It missed the limousine completely. That bullet has never been found. The second bullet entered the president's right upper back and exited the front of his throat. That's the so-called magic bullet, but that's the one that went on to hit Connolly. The third bullet is the one that hit him in the head. And the fragments were found inside the car. So there were 3 bullets found. Not 3 bullets found. 3 bullets fired. 3 cartridge shells. The shells from those bullets right beneath the 6th floor window. And I have a photograph of them when they were found shortly after the assassination. There were 3 shells right below that window. And they were all connected with Oswald's Mannlicher Carcano. Yes, sir?
The bullet that entered the president's head, was that from the front or from the back? Wasn't it the back of the head that was blown out?
That bullet entered, I should have made it clearer, and I didn't. That bullet entered the back of the president's head, right up here, upper right head, and exited the right frontal portion of the head. And, you know, I was telling you earlier about the head snap to the rear and that frame at 313 showing the president's head going forward. I also showed the jury in London a high contrast photo of frame 313. The Warren Commission didn't have the technology at that time, but I have it in the book here. And it shows this terrible spray of brain matter and blood and tissue at 313, and it's all to the front, indicating a shot from the rear. But it entered right here, and it exited the right front of his head. You can see it by watching the Zapruder film. You can see it. You can't see the spray clearly, but you see this terrible explosion to the right front of the head, about 5.5 centimeters.
But wasn't it true in the autopsy films that they had that the back of the head was blown out? I mean, when the president was lying.
Yeah. See, now what he's saying there is, wasn't it true that the back of the president's head was blown out? In other words, the tremendous defect, the 5.5 centimeter defect, was not to the right front, according to the conspiracy theorists, but there was a huge hole in the back of the president's head. Now, knowing this, what you just said, let's see if I can find the photo section. I show frames, not just at 313, but subsequent frames. At 314, I show a frame, 321, and also at 328. They're all in the book, and they show the back of the president's head. The Zapruder film. There's nothing. There's no hole in the back of the head. There was a tiny little hole, an entrance wound, covered by his hair. But the conspiracy theorists claim there was a huge, huge hole in the back of the president's head. Here's the frames of the Zapruder film. Now, you know what they're saying now, the conspiracy theorists? Are you ready for this? You're sitting down. Because this is the type of thing that can affect your physical equilibrium, you know. You know what they're saying now? The Zapruder film is a giant hoax, and Zapruder was a part of the conspiracy. Well, I mean, that's what I mean. There's no end to it, right? That doesn't make me a great writer. It's all silliness, but I have to address it in the book. That's why I've got these frames in here subsequent to 313. Well, even 313, you see, it's very, very clear. It's right here, not in the back of his head. But for these silly conspiracy theorists, I had to take up extra space in the book to show subsequent frames, and there's nothing wrong with the president in the back of his head.
I don't mean to throw you a softball, but it's actually a good question you asked us to ask. Why did Ruby shoot Oswald?
Okay. There was a fellow by the name of Jack Revell, and Jack Revell was the detective in charge of the Criminal Investigation Division of the Dallas Police Department. And he told the House Select Committee, he says, look, he says, Jack Ruby was a buffoon, and I tell this committee this. He says, if Jack Ruby was a member of organized crime, then the personnel director of organized crime should be replaced. Isn't it interesting that those who knew Ruby well, and he was a gadabout all over town at the boxing fights, baseball, whatever was going on, a big fire, he'd be there. Everyone knew Jack Ruby. Isn't it interesting that the FBI conducted over 100 interviews of people who knew Jack Ruby, and they literally laugh at the suggestion that Jack Ruby was a member of the mob who killed Oswald for the mob. It's a joke to them. And yet, young kids on computers, on internet, or whatever they call that stuff, bloggers, what's this blogging stuff? I've heard a website, now I hear bloggers. I don't know, I don't have a computer. Anyway, they don't know, they've never met Jack Ruby, okay? They don't know him at all. But they're in Dubuque or Sheboygan or whatever, and they'll argue with you. Oh, he was a big mafioso in Dallas. He controlled crime in Dallas, and he silenced Oswald for the mob. But those who knew him think it's a big joke. Now, why did he do it? That was your question. But I didn't want to omit this other part here because... Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I've paid this gentleman here to be here. Not enough, he says. I have no retort to that. But my wall is pretty thin, I'll tell you. And there's reasons for that, but I don't want to tell you why it's so thin. Anyway, I think we know why Oswald killed Kennedy. Not Oswald killed Kennedy. Why Ruby killed Oswald. Jack Ruby idolized John F. Kennedy. His psychiatrist said Jack Ruby loved John F. Kennedy. Not love you, mean it, not that type of thing, okay? But he loved John F. Kennedy, and he took his death very, very hard. as the whole world did, with one exception, China. They mourned Kennedy all over the entire world. And he cried over the assassination weekend. His sister Eva used to live in Los Angeles, and I used to talk to her from time to time. She passed away. But she told me, she said, you know, when Kennedy died, my brother Jack, these are almost his exact words, cried harder than when Ma and Pa died. So he took Kennedy's death very, very hard, and I agree with the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee that his hatred for Oswald and his love for Kennedy was one of the reasons why he killed Oswald. But there's a second reason. There's a second reason. Those that knew Ruby well said that Ruby was kind of an avenger type of guy, a vigilante justice type of guy, and he thought he was going to be a big hero for what he did. Yes, ma'am, right there.
Thank you. Before you became involved in your research on this subject, whether for the trial or the book, what did you think?
Before I became involved in this project, what did I think about this issue? I really didn't give it much thought at all. My whole life has been going from one project to another, working 7 days a week, and I read what I have to read. But I did have one thought that bothered me. I had heard that the Warren Commission had sealed the records for 75 years, and I think 99.99% of the American public have heard that the Warren Commission sealed the records, and obviously that bothered me. Why are you sealing the records if you don't have something to hide? But I didn't believe there was a conspiracy. I just didn't get into it at all. You know, I was trying one murder case after another, and I just wasn't. Well, not actually back in '63, but I was very, very busy. And but that bothered me. And let me talk about that issue. I haven't answered the. Let me tell you the truth about that. The Warren Commission did not seal the records. When the Warren Commission sent the documents and the records over to the National Archives for safekeeping, it was September 24th, 1964. I got the cover letter from Earl Warren, an honorable man. They all were honorable people. President Ford, he wasn't president at the time, on the Warren Commission. And that cover letter from Warren said very clearly, we hope that there will be the fullest disclosure possible of these documents to the American people. So there's no question that the Warren Commission did not seal these records. Now, the records were sealed, but they had nothing to do with the Warren Commission. What it was an old National Archives rule that had been around for years and years, that whenever they got documents from a federal investigative body, they sealed the records for 75 years, believed to be the normal lifespan of a human. Now, even that old National Archives rule has been completely eviscerated by the Freedom of Information Act in 1966 and the JFK Act in 1992. Now, let me tell you a couple other things. At the present time, there's a tiny, tiny fraction of 1% of those documents, there's millions of pages, that have not been released to the public. They have been released, but the document has redactions in it, crossed out. But the important point is this. All of the documents in their entirety have been seen by the House Select Committee on Assassinations and the Assassinations Record Review Board. They've seen the unredacted documents, and I've spoken to the head person at both places, the House Select Committee, G. Robert Blakey, he was the general counsel, and Judge John Tonheim was the head of the Assassination Record Review Board. They both told me that their people had seen all of the documents, unredacted, no smoking gun. It's a funny thing, you know, some of these conspiracy theorists, they'll try to get a document for years, and they end up going to court and spending a lot of money. And they finally get the document after 5, 6, 10 years, and there's nothing in there. It's just silliness. It's some vague allusion to maybe a mode of operation of U.S. intelligence agencies or some invasion of privacy issue or something like that. But there's never anything in there. So all of the documents are going to be released in total, unredacted, 10 years from now, in the year 2017. But the important point is that all of these documents have been seen by 2 federal agencies. Okay, let me get someone in the back a little more. Yes, yeah. I haven't asked you before, have I? Yeah, okay, good.
I
Because I want to
Okay.
ask as many people as possible.
In 1964, I was in New Orleans.
In 54?
64.
Oh, 64.
Visiting a friend I met at Yale who's an artist, a sculptor, and her best friend, Shelley Estrin, who's now deceased, was being interrogated by the FBI. I'm not a conspirator theorist at all. I don't believe that at all. But she was interrogated because she was at a social event, might have been the club, might have been a party, where Ruby and Oswald were both at. I was wondering if there's any evidence that they at least knew each other or had met each other.
No, there's no evidence that Ruby and Oswald ever met each other. And if they had been at this party in New Orleans, who would have presented that evidence to the jury? Jim Garrison, who prosecuted Clay Shaw. Wouldn't he be the guy to put that evidence on? He didn't put any evidence on it. It's all nonsense, silliness. Most of my book, if you want to say it, is devoting myself to rebutting silliness. No evidence that these two ever met or knew each other in any way. I want to get someone way in the back because I'm probably ignoring. I can't see too far back there. Is there anyone back there that's got a question? Okay.
Hi. I haven't read your book yet, but I intend to do so when it comes out in paperback and I can afford it. But
wait, what? You think this book's going to come out in paperback? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I really doubt it very much.
Okay. My question has to do with.
You're not going to read the book, which is fine. But I don't think it's going to come out in paperback.
Upstairs, I took a peek in the index under the name of Jim Mars, who is my favorite conspiracy theorist. And I have a question about the Peter Jennings special that was a 2-hour special on about 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. I think 2003, I think.
Yeah, okay. In that special, it was posed that the measurements of Dealey Plaza, as reported in the Warren Commission, really lined up with the lone assassin theory on Oswald. And they did make the point about the Conley being to the side and the front, not directly in the front. But later that evening, I heard Jim Mars on a coast-to-coast AM talk show say that he interviewed the workers who gave the Dealey Plaza measurements to the Warren Commission, and they were altered. So that physically there's no way that Oswald could have shot Kennedy and successful.
Yeah. Mars doesn't have much credibility with me. His book is one of the 2 books that Oliver Stone based his movie on. And if you come up with a theory, no matter how far out it is, you're going to find people who are going to support that theory. But there's no evidence at all that anyone altered anything. In fact, I have in the book not a sketch, what do you call it? The diagram, not just a diagram, the what? Yeah, the blueprint, whatever it is, of Dealey Plaza, and it's scaled. It's in the book. So what Mars is talking about, Mars never met, this is an old line, never meeting something he didn't like. He's never met a conspiracy theory he didn't like. He's a silly person, and he has no credibility whatsoever. I want to call someone I haven't asked. Have I called on you yet? Okay, yeah. No, you don't have to defend yourself on that.
I believe I read.
There's a lot of people that believe in a conspiracy that are not conspiracy theorists. Conspiracy theorists are the ones that go to conventions, they get newsletters and all that, but they're just people that, normal people like you, who may believe in a conspiracy.
To be a conspiracy person, you have to spend a lot of time dreaming this stuff up, right?
Right.
Here's my question. I believe I read in several places where LBJ and Connolly, one or the other, maybe even both, had some reservations about the Warren Commission report, and I was always puzzled about that. Have you run across that?
Yeah, LBJ, and I'm glad you brought up that issue because it really goes to something that I really should have talked about. LBJ told many people that he thought Castro was behind the assassination. Why? Because he said, well, we tried to kill Castro, so Castro tried to kill JFK. Now, if LBJ said that because he was privy to some classified information that you and I are not, that would be pretty heavy, right? But he's not indicating he's privy to anything. He's saying, we tried to kill Castro, so Castro tried to kill Kennedy. And the main, people are raising their hands already. I want to answer this first. The main reason why everyday Americans like you folks believe in a conspiracy, and the main argument that conspiracy theorists use to support their position that there was a conspiracy is that such and such a group had a motive and therefore must have committed the murder. E.g., that the CIA killed Kennedy because Kennedy was soft on communism. Actually, he wasn't, but I've heard that argument. Or the military-industrial complex killed Kennedy because Kennedy was going to withdraw troops from Vietnam and they wanted a war, so they killed him. Or the mob killed Kennedy because they wanted to get Bobby off their back. Bobby was the president's brother, the attorney general, and he had a missionary zeal and he went after the mob. So in other words, and I'm going to be sarcastic now again, but this is the way I am. I can't change at my age. I'm getting worse, actually. So in other words, if we listen to these people, that if you have a motive, well, you kill the person, okay? If we listen to these people, apparently if a president in this country is pursuing a policy that some particular group doesn't like the military or the environmentalists or Wall Street or the unions that they don't like, well, the group simply kills them, okay? You're supposed to laugh. That's a funny line. They don't like what the president is doing, they simply kill him. That's what we routinely do in America, right? We don't like what the president is doing, we kill him. Do you see how silly that is? If someone killed President Kennedy tomorrow, not Kennedy, President Bush tomorrow, there'd be all types of people you could say hated him. Are they all suspects in his murder? This profoundly silly Oliver Stone comes up with 10 groups that he said had a motive, and he's got all 10 involved in the assassination. So when LBJ says, I think Castro did it because we try to kill him, he was just talking like the guy next door. But if he's talking now, I've seen some documents, that's a different story. But he wasn't talking in that sense. He was just using this motive thing, that if you don't like someone, well, you kill them. But any prosecutor will tell you that motive only takes you so far. Somewhere along the line, you got to prove that the person who had the motive is the person who committed the crime, and you can only do that by evidence. And then a lot of them have whole chapters say motive, means, and opportunity. And they say this is a prosecutorial principle. Now, I've heard that term, but I didn't know of any fellow prosecutors who ever used that term. It's almost an admission that you have a weak case. Because somewhere along the line, like a courtroom buff will say, all right, he had motive, means, and opportunity. But did he do it? Okay, did he do it? I'll show you how silly motive, means, and opportunity are. And it's in all the conspiracy books. Motive, means, and opportunity that the mob had in CIA. He's coming into Dallas, Kennedy. He says, we're coming into nut country because it was a very right-wing area. A lot of people hated him because of his stance on civil rights. So they had a motive, right? Means, all they had to do is buy a rifle, right? Opportunity, all they had to do is be along the parade route. Doesn't mean anything. And yet, I think, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I think that's the main reason why everyday Americans think there was a conspiracy in this case. You ask them, and they'll tell you, they were trying to get Bobby off their back or something like that. And you got to have a lot more than just motive. Yes, sir, right there.
John Connally always maintained that he was not hit by the same bullet that killed Kennedy. How do you react to that?
Well, John would be one of the last people in the world you'd want to ask what happened to him, right? He's sitting in the car and all of a sudden he's shot. And he knows what happened? I don't think so. No, I mean, really, I don't think so. He doesn't know. And I quote him in his testimony where he's going this way and maybe this and maybe that. And I said, that's really the way it was. No, he didn't know what happened. He's a nice fellow and everything. But I was on radio recently, and I've just about encountered everything in this case because I've been working on it for over 20 years, although I've done a couple other little books too. But I heard a lady called in and she said, Mr. Bugliosi, she says, I see you're not talking about who really was behind this assassination. And I said, I'm sorry, who is this? Is it someone I haven't heard of? And she said, I think Lady Bird was. And I said, Lady Bird? I said, I've heard that I've heard that President Johnson was behind it, but how in the world do you come up with Lady Bird? I've never heard that before. And she said, well, she wanted to become First Lady, so I don't know. I don't want to call on anyone that I've already called on. Okay, so, yeah. Yeah, or you, assuming, but anyone that's already asked, I'd appreciate if you wouldn't raise your hand. Unless we get through everyone, then we can go back to you. Yeah, right there. Right there.
Now, will you guarantee, I have never read a conspiracy book, or I've not seen Oliver Stone's movie, and yet, and you're saying if we read this book, if I read this book, I will have all doubts expunged.
Oh, absolutely. No, there's no question about it. No,
I don't think so.
I was being interviewed in Fort Worth about a week and a half ago, and the lady says, I've believed in conspiracy all my life, and I'm not even through the middle of the introduction, and I no longer believe in it. I was just on Pittsburgh radio, David Hurth or something, 3-4 days ago, and he said he had been a real conspiracy theorist for years and years and years. And he's up to about 700-800 pages of the book, and he said there's no question there was no conspiracy. No. If you go into it with an open mind, I can guarantee you, way before you finish the end of the book, you're not going to have any question at all. No question at all. I'm sorry? Oh, he said there's 2 more questions. Let me get someone way in the back. I think you got white on. Okay. I told you don't get old, okay? You lose your sight and everything.
Well, first, I'd just like to say thank you so much for being here and for sharing this amazing work with all of us.
It's my honor to be here.
I am